welcome to Lead Live, reminding you of your personal genius and how you think in order to actualize what you desire.
Well, good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Depending upon where you're at on the planet, we're just very grateful to have you here with us. And those of you who will see this live broadcast at a future time, thank you for taking advantage of Lead Live. LEAD is leadership, excellence, and achievement on demand. We firmly believe that everyone is born with greatness, has genius, and to the degree to which we function as the CEOs of our individual lives, we will be much more transformative in our own nature and add great value to the rest of humanity and life itself. Fundamentally, we believe whether you're in the workplace, in a corporation, in a nonprofit or organization, in a serving the community in some other way, that you have the brilliance embedded within you to make an impact. An impact we're all already making. Being intentional in that regards is what separates the wheat from the chaff. And so let's get moving. We have an important topic today. It's called the ends and goals of leadership in the 22nd century. Yes, 22nd century. And my guest literally came up with this title. I just loved it. I was like, this is perfect for us to discuss. Getting outside of our comfort zone and imagining big. And so before I just go on and on, because I'm excited about the topic, let me share with you a little bit about his bio and maybe a little bit in, I'd like for you to see him. I'm going to ask Jet to bring him into the studio. But this gentleman, his name is Ed Valeau, Dr. Valeau. And this gentleman has worked in higher education for many years, nearly 40 years, choosing to serve as a faculty member, as a dean over educational programs, as a vice president of academic affairs, and then as a superintendent, president of a district that he literally transformed from just serving students kind of with his own wonderful legacy to elevating it to honoring the fact that there was a significant percentage of Latino students coming in who were already there, ensuring that it became a historic Hispanic institution, community college district serving hundreds of thousands of individuals over years and into the future. Now, this gentleman became a leader, but he didn't become a leader because somehow someone tapped him and said, you're wired to be a leader. His very character is about loving to be around people, liking people, caring to make a difference. And he was smart enough to have a wife who in herself fortifies him, provides him with the, oh goodness, the, I can't even find the right adjective, the more than support, but the understanding that he is with integrity. He is not only deserving, he is going to receive the support so that he can do much more than the obvious. And that's what he did. So, as a superintendent, he not only served within that district, he also served at the state level on a CEO, International Education Board. He was also the founding director of the Association of California Community College Administrators Mentor Program, and then more recently served in this international network called Star Scholars. I'm going to accelerate some of this so that you get to hear his voice in a moment. And I really want to honor him because he brought in hundreds of millions of dollars to that district. That's not minor. He ensured a bond measure that fortified the institution, creating a learning resource center, a library and learning resource center, science technology building, agricultural technology complex, Center for Applied Technology, King City Learning, a multi-complex with student services, outstanding programs and services with international scope, including marine applied technology, in Japanese agricultural training. I can say so much more, but his work extends beyond that to actually building and leading other organizations, as well as co-authoring seminal texts that are used right now by educators, leaders in the field, not only within the United States of America, but also in other countries around the planet. So, with that, I'd like, as I ask this distinguished gentleman to share something rather significant about him that we would not find in social media, I want to share just a few other tidbits. And I want to embarrass him along the way, of course. So as he smiles, I'm embarrassing him. I I love the fact that he is happy to live authentically. He's inspired to do good and especially inspired to just be himself. So, yes, he did the education track, leadership track because he wanted to. He wanted to add value. But he did what a lot of us don't do. He went beyond the so called borders of the United States to outreach beyond literally even the region of these United States, beyond the United States, to tap into what's happening and to help fortify policies and practices to ensure greater access to quality higher education, but also results from higher education in terms of students' performance and their readiness to enter the workforce, their readiness to build businesses, their readiness to make a difference society wise. Then he also did something that was quite fun. And I know a few people have chosen to dab a little bit in photography, but he went beyond just dabbing. I'm going to let him share more of what that looked like. And literally, he's got a whole portfolio. It's like that was always his profession. It's quite beautiful. So it just reminds us that we're not just this portion of ourselves wired to do X. We probably are wired to do multiple things that add to the value of life. So without saying more, and I will say much more, as you know, I'm going to ask this gentleman to introduce himself and tell us something that we would otherwise not know because it's not in the social media realm. Ed, good to see you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Webb. Let me first begin by recognizing you for your outstanding leadership. You and I worked together in the Peralta Community College District, and as we were talking before we entered the studio, that I am quite thrilled with the work that you're doing because it is a track that too many educators seem not to take once they have transitioned from their 40 or 35 plus years. They don't take another road, another what I call pathway. So I just want to recognize and congratulate you for that as I follow what you're doing. And certainly just thank you because this is so needed. With that in mind, there's not much more. I think you covered the waterfront. To be honest, there's not much more other than to say I have a son, who I'm very proud of. The lady that you talked about, who's my wife from over 50 plus years, was my college sweetheart, and we have been partners in this enterprise of life and living and exploring. And she actually, as you said, it gives me tremendous freedom with both confidence and support to explore and to examine new kinds of things. So I owe her a great deal of thanks for whatever success that I have had, will have. She's been there every step of the way. And so I appreciate you bringing that point up and recognizing that. I'm a graduate of a historically Black college and university, Southern University. And one of the things that we were taught early on was that there are no boundaries on what we can do except for the ones we set for ourselves. The only boundaries that we have are the ones we set for ourselves and believe that that is only how far we can go, how fast we can go, and what we can achieve. And with that kind of underpinning and that kind of background, I have been free to quote unquote soar, but not without the help of some fantastic mentors along the way. And you would know some of these names, Dale Anderson, John Peterson, Bob DeHart, and I could go on, George Boggs, and on, Christine Johnson, yourself as a mentor, because we learn by watching. And as a result, I've had that opportunity to do so. So I feel quite, how would I say, honored to be in this position because of so many people. Because without them, I would be absolutely wherever I'm supposed to be. And I still don't know where and how that would be. The one thing I can say, Dr. Webb, is that I believe that humor is extremely important.
Yes.
And oftentimes people get lost in their titles. They get lost in the definition of who they should be because people think they should be that. And so they tend to lose their humor. And so I am a person who believe in humor and intersperse humor into everything that I do.
It's awesome.
Okay.
It's awesome.
So that probably is what people do not know. Even though I'm very serious, I do think humor is important.
And it's part of that fun that's part of the wealth equation that we honor here. And we say wealth are the 5 F's: faith, family, finance, fitness, and fun. And so you live it well. You definitely have faith. Your family is absolutely seminal to you. And it was an oversight on my part not even to mention your son, because he is the underpinning of what just gives you a sense of absolute awe in life. I know you talked about him in the most loving way. It was just endearing in addition to your wife. And then fun. You mentioned that and you make it integral. And it's interesting because in the last 5 years, I've just begun to really appreciate the importance of fun. Yeah, I've been happy, I've been joyful, but I've never really allowed myself to experience much fun in my life. So thank you for bringing that up. That's powerful.
I think that's an important concept that we often lose. I was a Fulbright scholar and had the opportunity to visit India as well as Nepal. Fascinating. One of the things that I remember in Nepal, a saying that I took away from them, and it was this: when you get the chance, dance. And this came out of Nepal. So I am very, very grateful to that country for giving me that tidbit.
I love that. And I think it's Utan or Otan. He says,
Dr.
so wonderful to see Dr. Valeau. Yes. Perfect guest to discuss the topic. Well, with that lead in, and thank you so much. With that lead in, let's ask the first question, because there's a lot of questions that we want to engage to respond to. First is, given that the 22nd century is just 80 years into the future, what hopes do you have for people throughout the world?
A very important question. And I think to answer that question, we first have to understand and know the basis for futuring and models that are used for prediction. I'm not a futurist. I because of the information that you and I talked about, I have done extensive reading. But I think when to answer that question, we need to take a look at what models are being used to predict the future. We look at models such as prediction markets. Where's the market going in the 22nd century? Environmental scanning, scenario models, education and learning, technology road mapping, megatrends, and all of these things, plus many more, form the basis for where we're going in the next 80 years and how we're going to get there. When you asked me that question, I thought about the fact that we have to know where we are to understand where we might be in 80 years. I am not totally pessimistic, but I'm also not totally optimistic. And the reason I say that is because let's think about the issues and the concerns that we have today. Balkanization is one of them. With the advance of automation, people are losing jobs, people are not in jobs. We have conflicts all around the world for one reason or another. And I think the pandemic gave us a very good example of how underprepared we are to deal with the century that we're in. And we're still struggling with it. Overpopulation. For all we've done, we are still a planet that is exploding. Even though China tried to reduce the number of people that families could have, they've gone back and they've said you can have as many children as you want to.
Well, let's touch that because it's interesting. You may have more reading and understanding and likely do than I do about the notion of overpopulation. When I look at the planet and how much of the actual, if you would call it assets, the land that we actually occupy, it's not the majority of the planet. So isn't there enough even for the so-called population that appears to be leveraging or using too much of the world's resources? That's an open question. I wonder.
Yeah, I don't think that we will be able to hold all the population that we're getting. Because remember, when you look geographically, at some point, very, very soon in the future, much of the country or much of the planet is going to be underwater. There now predictions are saying that certain countries, some parts of Paris, much of Florida, much of some of California, we see land erosion.
Significant portion of the Bay Area. I've seen
Exactly.
the changes.
Yes.
Mhm.
And so we're losing land mass in some instances. And where are we going to put all these people? So no,
Well, I want to push you on that. I love that because so this is, I know out there for a lot of people hearing this thinking, okay, Dr. Valeau seems grounded, but Dr. Webb, she seems off. I'm going to go off. What
you're
about the
right.
notion of having living quarters submerged underwater? Already
Well,
exists.
and certainly, I think man's creativity will get us there. But I also believe there are going to be a lot of push and pull and mistakes made in the process before we get to what you're talking about, perhaps in the 22nd century. But if you're talking about the next 80 years, we're going to have, in my opinion, some real rough times. I'll shoot one out at you since you brought it up. Now, I mean, since you sort of want to explore a little bit, non-human rights. Non-human rights. If you notice, there's a tremendous amount of attention paid to animal rights, right?
Yes.
Not too far in the distant future, we're going to be dealing with, and people are going to be shocked with this, but we're going to be dealing with marriage between humans and non-humans.
The humanoids.
Humanoids. Think about that for a minute. In this century, think about the whole idea of poverty, crime, and famine. Unemployment is going to be increasing naturally. I'm talking about in the next 80 years. Energy shortages, water shortages. So when you ask me, I am optimistic, but I think we're going to go through a period where we are going to destroy so many things because of the revolution that we're in now. And I'll talk about this later, so that the 22nd century will be trying to solve some of the problems that we have created in the 21st century. So when you say living underwater, yeah, we could be living underwater, but then it challenges us. How are we going to breathe? Are we going to create new systems for the filtration of air? Are we going to create new systems for the acquisition of more space underwater? There are a lot of questions that certainly I'm going to be looking differently now because of you. I'm going to be looking, not really, I'm going to be reading very differently now. I will be reading very differently. I will be exploring different kinds of things to understand where it is the 22nd century. Understanding that our life cycle here on Earth, we're looking at 20, 25 years if we're lucky. Okay? If we're lucky.
I wonder, I'm going to push you even more. And this is more than a rhetorical question, folks. I really want to know, is it possible that something even more devastating than the pandemic could occur in the next few years? I don't want it, but it could occur that would shift us out of our fog of nonsense. And I call nonsense the hating because we can, the harming because we can, the undermining peoples, large groups of peoples because we can, the manipulation and the control because we can. Is it possible that something could happen that could shift us out of that fog of nonsense that is absolutely devastating to the human condition, that leads to the kind of concerns that you have? And I know you're optimistic by nature. So to say that you're not fully on board with this an optimistic perspective,
I'm
that
not.
you've got some real pessimism, that is significant. And so, what do you think? What's your response to that initial question?
Well, I do think something's coming. Yeah, something's coming that's beyond the pandemic. For example, look at the water shortage that's coming. Look at the water shortage. That's huge on this planet. That is huge. Look at the energy. Even though we talk about creating new sources of energy in terms of fuel cells and all that, the energy, just the use of energy by man. The other thing I think is coming is that it is the elimination of people as we know them today. Automation is going to be such that we're going to be looking at humanoids who are going to replace teachers. They're going to replace the workers as we know them today. And we haven't yet figured out how to manage that change. Not all change will be as a pandemic. A lot of this change will have to do with social kinds of structure, economic structures. Where you look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin is not new, but it will revolutionize the way we exchange currency so that we can live, we can buy, etc. I think that what is coming is going to cause a shock in the same way that we received the pandemic. Because think about this for a moment. These new antibodies, these new, what do we call them? These the new antidotes, if you will, for the curing of the pandemic. As we create a solution, we create a problem. We've yet to know and understand the total impact of the ingestion, if you will, of the vaccine. We're in a situation now where we are banking on short-term solutions, right? Without understanding long-term consequences. The long-term consequences could be in the form of mutated people. I mean, if you just, if you're not scared and you begin to think, mutations could easily occur, not just with this, with the ingestion of what we have, but between the atmosphere that we live in, between genetic engineering of human species. There are all kinds of things that are coming. Now, and also, let's not forget interplanetary travel. In the 22nd century, Mars will have been colonized. And we will be on Mars, but interestingly enough, we will be mating with the people on Mars. There will be a new species of people, because Mars, the Martians, and what we know today as people will be what? Mating. A new form of species altogether, a new form of intelligence, a new form of technology that we started, but because of the intelligence that we perceive that the Martians have, okay, we're merged. Now, one might say, "Oh, that's another theory. That's a conspiracy theory. That's a religious theory." Be that as it may, what we're looking at are modeling predictions. And if we go back, the modeling of the predictions that we're living in today were not by accident. That modeling revealed to us what would happen with automation. It revealed cars that would be self-driving. And interestingly enough, humans will not be driving because it's going to be too expensive for the insurance policy to keep them up. So what we're going to do, we're going to replace all those people.
And
So
we already have cars that are flying. They're just not released for the public,
yes,
but they're already written about. So a
yeah,
lot of things, folks, just in case you're listening to Ed, you're listening to Elnora Tena, and you're thinking, these people are a little out there. A lot of the stuff is already documented. It's already written about. It's already been explored. And this is not new technology. A lot of this has been in place, been worked on for over 50 years. Yes, 50 years that we're aware of. We don't even know how real long. And the other thing that comes to mind, and I wonder your thoughts on this, and that is, Dr. Valeau, and that is, can you imagine, on the one hand, that what we're seeking to predict and what we're predicting based upon the information that we have through scientists, through engineers, through mathematicians, through others, psychologists, and others, uh, that literally that perhaps their predictions come to the same point because everything comes to the same point, whatever that point is, that ultimately everything converges in the same space, and that as humans, we really can't change that. We think we're changing and we're manipulating, we're whatever, but ultimately the good that we seek, which I hope, I don't know if that's the case, but the good that we seek, we're going to actualize even given all the chaos and nonsense.
yes. We will go through that pessimistic stage. Absolutely, not pessimistic. We will go through that stage of evolving. Okay, we are evolving now. The pandemic is a signal point, a hot button point, where we are evolving as we are going through this, and we're finding solutions. It's not all pessimistic. We will continue to evolve. The question will be, who is going to be in the game? Who is going to be deciding the decisions that we make and the directions that we take? Who is going to create a model platform that allows us to be in a situation or in situations that we can take care of these problems? For example, we're going to have, we talk about democracy, but we're going to be moving into authoritarian governments.
Why?
I mean,
Why do you say that?
because people left to their own are not going to be subscribing to free decision making that allows for the good of all. If you notice in authoritarian governments right now, there tends to be more success with the virus because people have become accustomed to following directions. And those of us who believe in democracy, democracy will have its place. But when it comes to evolving governments, we're going to have an authoritarian form of government. Now, people will say that, I mean, is he crazy? I don't know. But I don't think I'm crazy, but I do believe in looking at the research and in looking at the literature and in looking at the prediction models, authoritarian governments will probably rule.
You know, it's interesting because the limited reading I've done, I probably compared to you, says the same thing. But my intuition, my heart says we get to create what we want. And if we allow ourselves, and this is a view, folks, we allow ourselves to be aligned with what we read that's solid, that may be based upon sound research, scientific research, that doesn't serve us, will likely actualize exactly what we fear. And quite frankly, I firmly believe that what we fear, we draw to us. What we imagine, we draw to
Yes.
us. And so I recommend that we imagine big. And that's why I was excited about this topic. We don't have to be a futurist to imagine big. You know that, you live it. We don't have to be a futurist or even a scientist to who has the historical information to be able to say, this is what I want to create, and then systematically go about creating just that. And so what I encourage us to do, and Kim writes, very true, it's this way in Saudi Arabia. I think she was referring to your statements about the authoritarianism. And yet we can shift things up. I'm thinking about the researches that I've read that where people literally meditated. Some may call it prayer, some may whatever. They meditated across the planet on a particular location to reduce the crime rate, and without anyone knowing except for the officials. And they did it for weeks at a time. And literally the crime went for whatever it was, it dropped by at least 50%. And there was no other intervention but meditation. So the power that we have is to literally use our capacity. Because what is everything? Everything ultimately is vibration. It's energy. And we are creators. We're constantly in the act of creating. And when we speak something, we're creating that, even if we don't want it. So when I say, what do we want in leaders for the 22nd century? I pose that question to you, where we have the more idyllic, whatever that idealism may be that we ultimately, let me back up a little bit. As you think about that question, Ed, here's something I wonder why we don't do, and I wonder how we can do it. We go and we have our institutions, right? You and I have both led, where we've come up with a vision, broad vision, includes everybody. People are on board, right? We come up with a mission, the same thing, right? We come up with a core set of values, and then we create strategic priorities. Then we create specific measurable goals. Then we create strategies that we take to get to the goals that ultimately ensures that we achieve our mission and meet part of that broad, big, remarkable vision. Can we do that as a species of humans? Can we do that even locally within a state, the United States? Can we do that locally, not only in our own businesses, in a way where we're living it and we're demonstrating the need for our officials, ourselves and officials, to do that? So we still have historical information, very important. We still have current policies, systems in place that reinforce whatever we want and we don't want. But then we've got this overarching mindset that we're moving towards so that we get to the 22nd century the way we want. What do you say to that?
I think we can. And the reason is because organizations are thought to be the most influential bodies in modern society, because organizations achieve goals and they solve problems, right? So therefore, if society expects to transform our world into a better place, into a place that we all can live, then it seems reasonable that transformation must begin with the leaders, But these leaders will be different. They will have to be the conscious leaders. Okay, not just the idea that we're going to be transformative leaders. Well, remember, when you're talking about transformative leaders, there's an exchange going on. You recognize me for what I'm doing, and I will give. You recognize me for what I'm doing, then I will give you support as you are moving in your cycle. But remember, there's that give and take, that if you give me this, then certainly I have an investment, only from the point of defined goods. You give me something, I do something.
It sounds like transactional. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Transactional. Okay. Mm-hmm. So now conscious leaders, conscious leadership, it's a focus on self-awareness of creating a conscious business that operates with three primary goals. One, a higher purpose other than profitability. Now, education, as an example, education is a business. Education is a business for all of its noble kinds of positioning. Is a business. Organizations like the World Health Organizations or UNESCO, they make money off of education. They make money off of predicting. They make money because it is a business. So we're going to have leaders operating with a higher purpose than profitability. The other thing is we have to operate with leaders who are sincerely interested in what? All stakeholders. All stakeholders. That's a different kind of leadership than we have today, because the leadership we have today depends on who has the power within the organization. We know that in colleges and universities, unions are very powerful. Then we also know that there are certain CEOs and leaders within our organizations who are very powerful. And it goes right down the line. Black, white, Asian, Indian, Latin, it doesn't make any difference. The paradigm is the same. In that old saying, he who has the gold make the rules, golden rule.
Well, let's stay there for a moment, because as you were talking, two things came to mind. One related to money, the means of exchange, which we'll come back to in a second. And please make certain that I bring us back there. And two, this, you talked about conscious leadership. And I just want to give recognition to Lily, who in Latin Biz Today came up with what she described as conscious leadership criteria for the 22nd century. And I paraphrased these and adapted them, and they're complementary to what you're saying, if not exactly what you're saying. Envisioning and executing leadership based upon characteristics and principles described here. Being able to discern and engage for the greatest good of all humanity. That's what you just said. Modeling excellence consistently and always. Emulating compassion, forgiveness, and comprehension, meaning listening to understand and not just to be heard or to be seen. Understanding that we're all connected in every way. We're going to come back to that before we end, likely. Courageously acting authentically, not just being deferential because you don't want to be viewed in a certain way that then now you're part of the out crowd, which you understand as children and as adults and even as executive leaders. Some of us don't take stances because we're afraid of a door closing. I get that. But what happens when we compromise on what we know to be the right thing to do? The next compromise is easier. And before you know it, you're not even leading. You're just in a position of leadership.
Absolutely.
Trust and profitability through integrity. So you literally are functioning with integrity. Doesn't matter what people say or do. I know it does hurt. I know it's challenging. But the bottom line, at the end of the day, people will be able to trust you because they know you never wavered in terms of your integrity. Generating abundance and prosperity with goodwill for all. So we know whether it's any religious text or philosophical text, at the core, they say the same thing. The more you give, whether you consider yourself to be altruistic or not, the more you give unconditionally, the universe gives back to you in abundance. Like throwing a boomerang, comes back with greater force. Use this inner knowing based choices to serve all humanity. Inner knowing, I call it intuition, which she emphasizes in number 9 too, called claircognizance. This knowing that you know, you don't have to have evidence, to teach and remind all of themselves to shift and transform within, to elevate their genius, their health, their well-being, and then, of course, excellence is a benefit. And then 10, see, recognize, and deeply appreciate the inherent and profound value of all. Uh, I can't emphasize that enough and get kudos to her for coming up with that list. But I'm sure there could be many lists. But at the core of it is what you and I agree, Ed, is so critical. The degree to which we can be purposeful and mindful of recognizing as humans, we can be humane. We can understand our oneness. We literally can leverage each other. There's enough good for all of us. There's enough assets for all of us. So when people say, and that's why I got to you when you said population, explosion, not enough space, not enough resources. Well, don't we create the resources? Well, how do we do what we need to do in order to ensure there's enough, whether it's on this planet or any other planet where the universe will allow us to go, right? Because we shouldn't assume that just because we want to be there, we're going to be there, right? There's forces beyond us, although we believe that we're the it. There are a lot of it's out there. The other is finance. When you said something about there will be some people in control, correct me if I'm wrong, and whoever is leading, meaning has the position for control or influencing behind the scenes and controlling, what if all of us had the sufficient assets where we were so comfortable, it didn't matter who was controlling because they needed us because of our assets? What if
Well, I,
all of
well, I think it would fit into the very model that we're talking about uh, in terms of leadership. Okay, but there has to be, again, a willingness to get there. And that's why I said to you earlier, we're going to go through some very, very tough times. And what you just posited, we will probably get there, but not without a norm, without norming and storming, okay, to get there. So a lot of things will have to happen relative to leadership. And on this planet and on this society, the division, both in terms of race and religion and economics, is so much ingrained that it's going to take the next 80 years, if you will, to help us get through exactly what you said. And that is, well, isn't it enough? I mean, couldn't we get there? Can't we all do that? It was like what Rodney King said back in the 60s when he was almost beaten to death and going into court.
it feels like the
Well,
60s, but it was the end of, was it
the
end of
70s,
80s or it was
80s,
early 90s? It feels like it was the 60s, but it
I
really
date
wasn't that long
myself. I'm so
ago.
sorry. But his question was, can we all
We all
just
just
get
get
along?
along. Mhm,
And
mhm,
that is going to be very much dependent on the kind of leaders, all the way
mhm,
from the White House
mhm,
down, the
mhm,
kinds of leaders. And it's not going to happen overnight. But I tell you one thing, according to Standard and Poor's, the kind of leaders that we're talking about, the research shows that they have outperformed the people who lead these organizations have outperformed traditional organizations by 9 to 1. The kind of leaders that we're talking about. But we have to be bold and we have to be brave in order to take on those kinds of
mhm,
leaders. And
mhm.
that is not going to be easy. We haven't even touched this whole notion of a divided society, and I doubt if we will be able to touch it. But suffice it to say, much of what you said earlier in terms of can't we just sort of get there will have a lot to do with our willingness. And I do not believe in the next 80 years, we will demonstrate that kind of willingness to get us to where we need to be and to what you're talking about.
Uh,
Because we have to go through a period where we say, well, what are the rules of the game coming up?
mhm.
Who will run, who will rule, and how will they rule? How will value be accumulated and distributed? How will we connect and to whom? And what will we hold as value? in this society? These are questions people aren't even thinking about.
The
These,
other thing I posit, and that is we you're right. Unless we do particular things in a very strategic and um, clear way, it's going to take us a while to get where you and I would like to see us get. And the assumption is that everybody wants to get there. Let's be clear. Some people don't want to get there. They like where it is, or they want complete chaos. They're not looking for authoritarianism. They're looking for anarchy because there's a belief that you destroy all governments, everything, people will find a way to create something new. So I understand there's all these different belief systems. Yet I need to ask the question, how do we help to change the hearts of people? All this content and these research and all that stuff is all interesting, especially for those of us who are researchers, trained researchers, and understand the inherent value. But many of us don't care about research. And even if we did, would say, so what? Because our heart's not affected. At the core of who we are in terms of our mindset, our predispositions, our actions, our results is a reflection of how we feel, our emotional connection to anything. And so, this notion of race, which as a term to describe humans, didn't exist until it existed in recent history. And it was created for the purpose of dividing people. That's why I don't use race to define a group of individuals, because there's only one race. It's called the human race. There are different ethnicities, different cultures, different colors of the skin. And literally, we already know from biology, scientific research, that there's more difference within a group than there is across groups. So all of it is fallacy. It's nonsense that's been so well operationalized, made people think that because you're a darkie, I'm a darkie, we're somehow less than someone who's a so-called whitey. There, first of all, I've never met anyone who's white, but I understand it's a way to clarify a group of people. I've met Caucasians, I've met Anglo-Saxons, I've met.
I understand.
How do we literally touch the hearts of people where they choose to critically analyze things in the way they have the capacity to, where they begin to say, well, why are we using that term? It's not relevant. In fact, it's harmful. Or
Well,
why do we even have a dictionary that has associated with a group of people, Black, everything that's inherently negative and ugly and destructive, except for it when you're in the Black? um, so
very
how do
good.
we get people where the energy is so um, impactful, where they're like, I feel the need to grow?
Well,
Because what is it? Is it? What's the human condition about if it's not about growth? Go for it.
well, I think when we get to a point where we are not threatened, we're not threatened by our identity, we're not threatened by our economic status, we're not threatened by the power or the strength of an individual. Um, Changing the hearts and minds of people first began with, as you said, self. But even that, have you noticed us, middle class people, a lot of the problems that we see and rationalize and intellectualize, we don't get as plus as the person living in India on the street who every day, or Africa or China, who every day wake up to the same thing. No food, no shelter, no hospitalization. Those are things that we don't have to worry about. I'll give you a good example. You couldn't tell me how much a dozen of eggs cost. You couldn't tell me how much a gallon of milk costs. You couldn't tell me how much it costs for a sack of potatoes. Why? You don't have the economic stress to have to worry about that. You need gas, you just put it in your car. But you take someone without economic means, they can tell you exactly the answer to those questions. I believe that until and when we get to that point where we don't have this division, where people have to think about their financial well-being, okay, in the 22nd century, there will be no need to worry about your financial situation because things would have been created. And I'd like to list some of those things later on. But you started on something that I thought was a part of that total conversation and need clarification. If we talk about leaders in the 22nd century, then the question is, well, what is this leadership? And I think that it has to do with when we, you, I, anyone in a situation, when you have to be able to teach and learn in every interaction. When we talk about mentors, I have to subject myself to a mentor. India has probably perfected this in terms of the whole notion of a guru. When an Odissi dancer, when a person who's learning how to dance says that he or she has a guru, that guru is the teacher, and that student subject him or herself to whatever that teacher is talking about, okay? We're going to have to teach and learn in every interaction. I think we're going to have to attend to the whole, the part, and the greater whole in order to create this power that we all want. I think we're going to have to give and get value for value, and that currency idea. You mentioned it in a different kind of way. We're going to have to engage in joyful practice, connecting. And that's the word I would use to respond to what you were saying. We're going to have to develop better antennas for us to connect so that we don't see each other as enemies. We don't see each other as having something that we want. And we're not talking about, look, folks, we're not talking about something idealistic. I think Dr. Webb was very clear. We can get there if we choose to get there. We're going to have to search for the true and the useful value. What do we value, not only as a society, but as a race of people, the human race? Because we're going to integrate what we call artificial intelligence. We're going to create humanoids. We're going to mix with other species. We're going to create new forms of energy. We're going to invent not necessarily new medicines, but other ways of curing ourselves. We're going to live longer. This society will not be a society in the future, 22nd century. It's going to be colored. And I'm not talking about race. I'm talking about it's going to be colored. And that creates in the mind of color a different kind of thing for folks. When you say, well, color, I can just imagine people listening to this thing, right? Listening to this presentation and saying, oh, that's exactly what we're trying to avoid. Exactly what we're trying to be. People will no longer, in the 22nd century, you talked about it, these drudge jobs. It's going to be such that people are going to be involved in their personal, creative, and intellectual pursuits, not necessarily for money, okay, but for the sake of being a human being. The line between work and play, it doesn't exist in the 22nd century. The need for money, average spending on household items in the 22nd century is not going to be there. Replicated technology, okay, will create an abundance of resources that will eliminate famine and diseases and the need for war. We're going to have hospitals in our own rooms. Police forces will be dominated by robots. Firefighters, we no longer need firefighters because we have robotics. Educators, as we know today, they're going to be relegated to a different role. Robots, humanoids, are going to be teaching because they will understand the human value better. They will understand how to deal with learning disability. They will know how to deal with learning styles as we talk about them, the needs of the learner. New technology will be such that we're going to have a whole different, quote unquote, response force. I don't want to call it a workforce, response force. And we're going to be okay with that. We're going to have designer babies, and we're going to be mixed with other people. Religion and Christianity, as we know it in the United States and America, not going to exist. Okay? New York, London, Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Sydney are all going to be underwater. The natural world is totally damaged. Totally damaged. Some people will never see a monkey, never see a dog, never visit a forest, never see a rainbow. We're going to go through that. I mean, we're going to go through what we're going through now. And I'm optimistic now about how we come out on the other end based upon some of the things that we're talking about. So, but not before norming and storming. This whole thing that we're going through, race relations, economic downfalls, etc. I'm reminded in Psalms, there was something that I read in Psalms that basically said, we are mere shadows. We're nothing but shadows floating across this vast ocean, thinking that we're important, thinking that we have things to do. But in the middle of it, everything means nothing other than the value that we ascribe to it. And some things that we ascribe value to, for the majority, has no value.
I think the emphasis there, part of it is we're creating our reality all day long, and we get to choose the values that we have.
Yes.
And given that we get to choose the values, why not choose the greatest values? Given that we get to create our reality, why not create a profound reality? Given that we get to change and transform the nature of our current conditions, going into whatever travails, going into whatever opportunities, going into whatever, why not do what we really enjoy doing now and not wait until we're in the midst of full blown chaos? Chaos always exists, but in the middle of that chaos is perfect peace. Why not drive our lives so that we experience that perfect peace, so we pay it forward? So as the challenges that Ed describes, we get to minimize, because we're the force. We're creating that momentum. We can shift that momentum, folks. And I believe I've read a lot of what you're talking about, Ed, and I've intuited a lot of what you've talked about. We get to create the reality. The ends are going to be whatever they're going to be, humbly speaking. We get to shift the journey in a way where hopefully we all get to the same end point, healthier, happy, in a remarkable space as energetic forces.
But I do think, and I agree with you 100%, we're going to have to develop a consciousness that we currently do not have, a consciousness that recognizes and appreciate what is going to be the ultimate situation, the ultimate for all of us, okay? We are not there. We are not where we are now. We're tribal. We are in, and I'm just thinking about this as we're talking, we are in a tribal mode. And everything that we do, no matter we talk about the diversity and we talk about everybody, kumbaya, and everybody diversity, we can all rise to the top. We have to watch ourselves and evaluate ourselves to make sure we are really delivering on what we're saying. And that consciousness has to be at the very top. We, you and I, and many others who are probably listening to this broadcast, don't have the bullhorn. And we need more leaders prepared to use the bullhorn to do the very kind of thing that you're talking about. But I don't think it'll happen in 80 years. Even the light went out on that one, Dr. Webb.
That's powerful. That is powerful.
The lights went out.
Kim wrote something in response to your statement. She says they already have robotics that travel the hallways of her university.
Yes.
A screen for COVID exposure verbally communicates the status of the exposure and sprays disinfectants. And what did Autumn say? It says, yes, we're going to have to develop better antennas to connect with people better. That he was just paraphrasing you, Ed. And then, thank you. It says, it's how we change the hearts of people. You got it. You got it. And you were going to say something to Kim's statement.
Well, I think that technology that Dr. Andrews is talking about, okay, as we move further down, that technology is going to be the very technology that will cause us to have interplanetary travel. That technology will be advanced in such a way, and Elon Musk and these other guys, they're really on target, okay? But what other problems and challenges are they creating as we move into this next stratosphere? And this is what the 22nd century is going to have to respond to, as those of us who are in quote unquote the 21st century are creating quote unquote innovations. And that's the word we like to use. We are looking at the short term. And we might even be sacrificing certain things in the short term, not understanding the long term. 80 years, we're moving at a warp speed. Yesterday,
I don't think we're going to recognize 20 years from now.
No. Yesterday was Tuesday, and we're already getting ready for Thursday. And we're thinking about what's going to be on the plate for Thursday. And we just got past Tuesday, less than 24, a couple of hours ago.
But I want you to speak to the power of imagination, because basically a lot of the things you talked about in terms of the 22nd century is based upon the imaginations that are happening now. What if we imagine some things that in theory no one's imagined right now, or we've not heard from a child who imagined it? We've not heard it from a 90-year-old who's been imagining it for years but never shared it. What if we experience new imaginings that could catapult that next 80 years in a way that literally has nothing to do with what we can even conceive right now? What's the power of imagination to you?
Well, I think the power of imagination creates that next force. The power of imagination creates that next step. The power of the imagination and the ability to see it and put it into practice is what's going to be the driving force. You know, I'm enamored with the philosophy of the philosophers in India, and to some extent China, but more India, because they have actually perfected in so many ways the power of the imagination. When they talk about illnesses, a lot of times they talk about imagine what it would be like not to feel this. Imagine what it would be like to suspend yourself for the next hour and a half. Tremendous. Not everyone can do it, but I think you're on to it. The power of the imagination will cure a lot of the diseases that we have. The power of the imagination will take us beyond what Dr. Kim articulated with regards to the robot. The power of imagination will get us to more people being heart-based without fear. Because fear, we are in the grips of fear right now. Fear for ourselves, etc. But what if we had the imagination? I will imagine the future. But what worries me.
And what is, don't lose your thought, what if fear is contrived? And we think, oh my God, no, no, I just have fear. What if we're programmed to have fear? What if we reprogram ourselves and say, no, 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 I'm not going to let those television programs, I'm not going to let those movies, I'm not going to let the sound bites, I'm not going to let the news, I'm not going to let even the stuff that's happening around me that's real foster the fear in me, because then I get the benefit of that fear, which is really not benefits. I get unhealthy. I have diseases. I am no longer open to creating. I'm no longer myself. I'm no longer authentic. I'm actually dying. What if we just reprogram?
Well, if we could reprogram, you're talking about an evolved, in a lot of ways, you're talking about an evolved mind that is prepared to go against the grain. Give me an example. There are people with medical problems, medical issues. Someone comes along and says, you really don't need to take this particular drug because CBD and cannabis will cure that. Well, first of all, you got to get past the stigma of CBD and cannabis before you take it. Secondly of all, you have to believe, enlightened mind, believe that so strongly that this, what you're doing, is going to be better for you. Even though the doctors are telling you, don't take it. The scientists are telling you, don't take it. This is the war we have going on right now. Mm-hmm. So I totally subscribe to your thought of the, what if we could get outside? But just as we were taught to stay inside, we're going to have to be taught to get outside. And let me ask you this question, Dr. Webb. How many people do you really know are moving outside in their thought processes?
Too few. A growing number. That's the good news.
But they don't have a bullhorn.
And let me tell you, the power of the pandemic, although too many loved ones died, it was horrific and still is. What it did is it caused us to temporarily, not long enough, because we were ratcheting up back to the same state, but it caused us to temporarily stop where we could not. Of course, for some of us, we went into depression. For some of us, we went into other kinds of unhealthy behaviors. But the point is, it caused us to stop. And we had the opportunity, and still do, to reflect, to think deeply, to ask ourselves questions that we supposedly didn't have time to, because we had families and we had school and we've got work and we have commitments and on and on and on. The week only 15 minutes to think for ourselves, and we weren't thinking for ourselves. We were giving it away. Now we have a little bit more time. And well in excess of 12 million people, in the United States alone said, we're not getting back on that rabbit, nor that horse. We're not going into that rabbit hole, and we don't want to just go mindlessly wherever the horse takes us. We want to slow down. We want conditions to be what we want. And that intentional decision to stop out in order to reflect and regain a sense of self, or build a sense of self for the first time, is powerful.
It's an inflection in this modern day society. Mm-hmm. It certainly is an important inflection. And as Dr. Andrews mentioned, they're already doing some of those things. And I agree. We're going to have models of responses here and there. Mm-hmm. The question becomes, how do we harness it in a way that it allows more changes than few changes? I dare say that a lot of people who got impacted by this, interesting to look at the socioeconomic standing of those people. You see, because there is such a thing as discretionary time. Mm-hmm. Okay? It's not just about money, it's discretionary time. Mm-hmm. And how you deal with that discretionary time is not something that we are accustomed to. So my question with you would be, how, in your mind, would this be channeled in a way that it could travel way beyond the borders of the United States, India, China, Africa?
And let me tell you, my humble perspective is the moment we stop and meditate on whatever it is that we want to create, we want to experience, we want to feel, the vibration is sent out and it has no bounds. There are no
Yeah, you're right.
regional
Absolutely.
boundaries. There are no national boundaries. There are no country boundaries. It literally emits. It's like a little something placed into the water. It's in the sea and it has a ripple effect, although we may not think it does, but it literally has a ripple effect.
Absolutely.
And so one doesn't have to do what you and I do. You working on international projects to make a difference. Me working in the financial services arena and using this platform and other things to help organizations. Well, they don't have to do what we do. They can do what they do in their own profound way that it elevates even faster or in their own unique way, their consciousness that complements us moving towards a healthier state for all of humanity. And so meditation is as simple as it gets. And then one can literally write op-ed pieces if they're so inclined, in newspapers and online and blogs, however they want to do. One can go out and find a stage in a public arena and convey or profess or share examples of the healing power, the transformative, the actual impactful way that this conscious leadership can have in the lives of individuals and the organization's effectiveness, whether it's a university, whether it's a corporation, whether it's a nonprofit, whether it's a community center, literally, whether it's a municipal government, whether it's at the national level. Literally, every person makes a difference.
Absolutely.
Whether one is living on the street, I've been impacted by people who are homeless in remarkable ways. I've been impacted by people who are in so-called most senior executive roles. And the only difference between those two individuals is their station in life. Both brilliant, both providing assets, not just to me, to other people, and serving in their own way. So it's not about roles, it's about consciousness, it's about mindset, it's about the heart wiring. And we can rewire our hearts. If our hearts are such that we think we're predisposed to harm, we can rewire that. I've witnessed that of people coming out of prison that we've worked with historically when I was in another leadership role. But let me tell you, choice is all that we have. We are powerful because we can exercise choice, right?
Well, I think you hit the operative word is choice and a willingness to take a different direction. Okay. Part of that requires what I would see is a concerted effort in our institutions, a concerted effort
Yes.
in what we do in our organizations, in leadership, what we do in government, what we do, and as you described it, at the very, very basic level. Earlier, we talked about the kinds of leaders that are going to be needed now and into the 22nd century. Part of that leadership, as you and I would both agree, they're heart-based. I mean, we didn't use that term for leadership, but they are heart-based. And though the audience listening to this might think, oh, man, where are they coming from? This is all pie in the sky stuff.
No, it's grounded.
But it really is not. Actually, it is fundamental. And as I note Dr. Andrews' comments about mentoring, currently I'm involved in a program that is doing virtual mentoring in California community colleges with two outstanding young scholars who are African-American men working on the development of a virtual mentoring program. Because as you know, community college students are the last ones holistically and systematically to get mentoring. And yet they represent one of the largest populations in higher education in the world. So we're working on trying to establish that mentoring and matching virtually. So I do think that we have the challenge, yes, to be individual, but we're going to have to do more than just individually do this. We're going to have to, and I think Dr. Andrews we're going to have to do a lot of mentoring.
Yeah.
We're going to have to do a lot of bringing people along. We're going to have to let go of a lot of our baggage in this fear in that. We're going to have to develop trust models that we've never developed before. We're going to have to be able to allow ourselves to be vulnerable and not feel threatened because we are vulnerable. Man will have to change his entire behavior in order to get to that heart-based model. I don't think we're going to get, you and I will disagree. I don't tend to see in the next 80 years us getting there in a way that I think you would want us to get there. I would want us to get there. Again, I think we're going to go to the norming and storming stages because we are creating so many new systems. We're creating so many new responses to immediate challenges. And
let me compliment you by saying, go with our current trajectory, I agree with you. And with a new trajectory that I am feeling, because it's not about thinking. We can't think into results unless there's the heart connection. With the right feelings and restructuring our subconscious mind, using our mental faculties is another conversation, a whole hour plus conversation, literally could get us there. And so, Kim, Dr. Andrews, you're spot on. In grad school, you've worked on a project with a company in India interested in that's another conversation, but interplanetary travel. There's quite competition going on for that as we speak. And that's happening in a number of places where these, what we would call innovative, remarkable, they're just normal, systematic movement in the right direction to get us to a place that we're envisioning, that some of us think is Star Trekky, and not even hopefully never Star Wars. And then that it starts with influence and mentoring young people. They are collectively ready for change, as Dr. Andrews says. And she also writes, I'm constantly approached by students interested in developing projects that involve saving the environment. I am so hopeful, Ed, Dr. Valeau, because I have met so many young people. No, it's not the vast majority of people on the planet, but so many young folks who are tired of the nonsense that our generation and even the generation that follows up, because we're baby boomers, that follows up are bringing in. They want something that is absolutely tangible, that they know will allow them to thrive, and they're less concerned about this bifurcation of whatever, this dualistic thinking, this you're good, I'm bad, you're good nonsense. And I call it nonsense. I could use other language to describe it, but it really is harmful and undermines the nature of not only our species, but the planet's health.
Yes,
the
absolutely.
Planet's health. So where we go, so goes the planet. But the planet doesn't need us. It could just boot us off.
And in a lot of ways, it is. But I think what you just said in terms of and Dr. Andrews, the population today. Let's look at this. A person born today, 80 years from now, will be 81 years old, 82 years old. A 10-year-old, 80 years from now, will be 90. And you go on and on and on. again, I want to keep on this point. We are norming and storming, and I'll use the word forming.
Yeah.
And our formation will be recognized in the 22nd century. That's the point. And in that century, the hard work that you speak about, heart-based, the need for us to be and I don't mean this negatively, but self-centered in a way that we understand the need of others, and we're interested and committed to making sure that everyone is valued. All people are celebrated. We don't have that today. And I think that as we evolve out of the 21st century, we will be moving toward the creation of a century, 22nd century, whereby we will see some of the things that we are predicting. And it will be a better place. I'm not saying where we are now is not. I like where I am right now. Whoever was in the 19th century or the 20th century helped to create this space. I'm grateful. But remember what we went through in that period in terms of relationships, in terms of discovery, Sputnik, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? Holding down other nations, bombing other nations, killing. Okay? We did some horrific things. Okay? Again, getting us to that next stage. So we won't see it. The young people who are now coming up will see it. It's a matter of making sure that which we're doing now is fully understood. We're not dealing in short-term models, but long-term models. But our society today is fixed on short-term solutions for immediate gain and immediate, immediate gain and gratification. We want it now. Right now. And so I am optimistic, but I'm cautious. And I think, and I'm repeating myself, there are a lot of good things happening. Lots of good things happening. We don't know enough about them. We don't know because we're not sharing. We're not giving a lot of credence to what we could do if we develop better sharing mechanisms. Why is it we have to deal with this notion of third world developing countries? Why is it?
And are they third world, considering all the genius resources?
Okay. Why is it that we're looking at new invention that are getting to these countries later rather than sooner? Why is it we're not helping those countries to develop the technology of to create that technology or create that intellectual capacity that you might surpass what we're doing?
Why is it that billions and trillions of dollars have been invested in certain countries through UNESCO and other organizations only to watch the pandemic literally neutralize that investment?
Absolutely.
If it was really solid, nothing could neutralize it.
No.
So the question is, where are we placing our investments? And are we really encouraging people to build themselves up, or are we encouraging folks to maintain the status quo, to maintain the current system? And I know it's not either or. There could be something in the middle. I've read so much about the Cuban Missile Crisis. In fact, there's a particular missile crisis. I have a book here, I can't remember, from the Haas School of Business when I was there. And it literally demonstrated at least 5 different plausible explanations. In all of them, there was enough evidence to say this was the reason, this was the reason. Same thing with regards to the impact the pandemic had on so many so-called developing countries, and having that experience wipe out the so-called positive effect of the interventions. So maybe we should, as we discuss, maybe there should be a reevaluation, a reassessment of what interventions are going in, because if something as short term, hopefully, as a pandemic can wipe out many years of trillions of dollars investment, that was not the right investment.
That's an excellent point. That's an excellent point.
And then
well, we have to get there.
And I know we've gone beyond by 25 minutes, and you've been absolutely kind by staying. And those of you who are able to stay here doing whatever hour this is for you, whether it's lunch or dinner or morning, we appreciate it. And I really want to wrap us up and ask you to come back another time, because we just touched the surface. I know there's more details that you have about leadership in the 22nd century.
Yes.
And literally, we gave context and we push pull because we want you to know this. We understand the complexity and not the full complexity, because you have some of the information we don't have. So when we bring this topic back, we want you to come back if you're so available. And this gentleman has conveyed that he agrees with you, with Dr. Andrews, about mentoring, but he also knows that you, Dr. Valeau, I have inspired a multitude of scholars around the world. And that's a tribute to your wiring I talked about, to be of service and to be in service. And yes, we do talk about, and we do live, and we do believe in the power of going within. My brother and I call it selfishness. And one of my brothers, that is, Paul. And it's not that, we are self-indulged. No, we believe that by understanding the self and healing and developing key areas, etc., and giving unconditionally, that is purely real selfishness, because we understand that we belong to a bigger context. And the degree to which you're healthy, happy, remarkable, rewarding, and are able to pay it forward too, we're better off, even if we never meet you. So we do want you to be your best. And that's what you're talking about, Ed, is that going within, being self-focused, self-centered in a way that's healthy, but not selfish from the standpoint of, I got mine, you just get yours. Because if no one else has what they need, you really don't have what you need. And that's part of the reason why I think we have a lot of turmoil on this planet now, because somehow we believe, I got mine, but it's at your expense because it's not enough. Well, it's a different paradigm. I got mine, so do you, because there's enough.
And Dr. Webb, it's broad. It's so broad when we start talking about countries and we start talking about people in those countries. So I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk and see you again and enjoy the conversation. I hope the audience understands that our enthusiasm is directly related to our interests and our concern for humanity and our concern for all of us as we move through this universe. Some of us will be here, many of us will be gone, and we will again. Man has a way of reinventing himself. I am absolutely convinced that the 22nd century will be a much better place than where we are now. And much of that has to do with what and how we take care of business, and in a way, Dr. Webb, that you talked about it with regards to being heart-based. I'm optimistic, but in a philosophy, I will be here in another form. I don't know what that form is, but I will be here in another form watching. With that, again, thank you, audience, for being here. Dr. Webb, thank you for your genius, and thank you for your leadership in making this platform available for people to expound on their views and their thoughts in a way that makes sense. And I've enjoyed it immensely.
I honor you. I'm so appreciative of you. And I especially appreciate your deep reflection and your unwavering commitment to service that is just reflective to me of, and I shouldn't say just because it's powerful, of unconditional love. And thank you for always paying it forward and taking care of you, your lovely wife, your remarkable son, and others you love. Beyond those, you give as well. So
God bless.
go forth, continue to be your remarkable self. It's an honor.
Thank you. Enjoy.
And folks, I want to thank you, and I want to end with this wonderful comment by Dr. Kim Andrews. Excellent discussion. Thank you both. We thank you, all of you who are viewing, who didn't write in comments, but you're watching by television through Roku TV or Amazon TV. We thank those of you who are also on Facebook or visiting or viewing through LinkedIn or YouTube. We are so appreciative of you for choosing to be your healthy self, your best, and to leverage whatever content will enable you to get to the next level. And you define the next level. And we firmly believe that you are at your best when you choose to be the CEO of your life. Whether you're building up your own business, working in support of someone else's business, and hopefully, most importantly, living in a way that's authentic and serving the greater good. Always with respect, gratitude, and wadom.